Good morning. We'll be starting here in a couple of minutes. If you want to go ahead and open up your polls while you're waiting, both your chat pod and your Q&A pod. Also, we're going to be doing polls at pollev.com. And you might want to go ahead and download the Flagger Pocket Guide, but you can also do that later. And if you need copies, we can get them to you. And we'll give folks 30, 45 seconds to finish logging in. And if you have an issue with the download from the chat pod, please feel free to just pop a message in the Q&A or send us an email. Amanda even put her email address in there. Okay, good morning and welcome. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here with the Cornell Local Roads program where you're in New York State LTAP Center. And back in Ithaca after a couple of weeks out of town. It's nice to be back. A little cooler weather than where I was down in the deep south. Today we're going to be talking about flagging in our antepenultimate, yes, means third from last, webinar for the summer in our foundational series. And again, we're going to be doing polls and there's a pocket guide and we'll talk more about those as we go along. Okay. If you haven't done one of these webinars before, over in the left bottom, you'll have your audio settings. Please go ahead and open up your chat pod. That is a one-way. That's where we can send you links, so you don't have to type in links for the polls or the handout and things like that. May ask you to raise your hands now and then the Q&A is where you can put your questions in, ask any questions you want. I'll do the technical stuff, and Jody and Amanda, who are in the background, can help take care of any of the logistics. Okay. Now, if you're wondering, this is worth one professional development hour here in New York State. Only the person who's registered gets it. Um, oh, and if you're from another state or something like that, just need to check with them. Okay. As I said, they've got 3 more webinars, including this one ready to go. We've got ethics next week, snow and ice strategy, and all 3 are worth PDH. But hopefully people are signing up because they want to learn something. Now, if you're also interested, we do have our fall workshop series out, Solutions for Safer Roads in Snow and Ice, and you can see where they are around the state, and you can register for that. There's a link in the handout. In fact, I'll actually bring the handout up. There's an outline of what we're talking about today, a place for some notes, a list of publications, including links to a Flagger tutorial and a Flagger basics that we've put on there that covers some things we're not covering in the webinar today. In the Flagger basics, some things we've learned, and also the tutorial, something that might be useful for you later on when you're trying to see what you remember. There's a little test that goes with it. If you like those, let us know. We can do more of them. We're being full staffed in about a couple of weeks, and then maybe we can add some more topics to our asynchronous selections of things to do. And then over on the second page, you can actually see the uh, upcoming events, the webinars, our fall workshops, and the bridge conference being held in Saratoga Springs this fall. Okay. Now, let's do a quick welcome. I want to see who's on here for our 70 attendees. This helps me quite a bit. Who do you work for? So who do you work for? There's a lot of you I can see have already started. So we have consultants. We have work for a living, some honest folks, towns, county, city, village, state or federal. I have some folks with probably the Thruway Authority or things like that. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, like the variety. Your job, are you an administrator, the highway superintendent, commissioner? Are you an engineer, a planner? Are you in the field crew? Are you a supervisor, board member? You do whatever the boss tells you to do or none of the above. If you do none of the above, please put in the Q&A what that is, just so I can figure out who those couple of people are that are putting in none of the above. Helps me a bit. And as I expected, about not quite 2/3 of you are engineers. Okay. Okay, that's useful. Okay. And then how long have you been in your current position? Less than 3 months, less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 10 to 15, 11 to 20, or 20 plus. Okay. My goal, of course, today is to give you some foundational stuff for uh, webinars. But really, if you pick up one thing and take it home, I've had a good day. And if you're having issues putting in answers to the main polls, you can always put them in the Q&A and I can put them out to let everybody know. Okay. Quite a variety. I like it. I like to see it. Now, before I go on, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. We're talking about flagging today. Raise your hand if you've actually flagged live traffic. Raise your hand if you've flagged live traffic. Meanwhile, I'm going to grab my coffee, which is still in my bag, 'cause I had to get my teeth cleaned this morning. Of course, now I'm going to drink coffee. About a little over a quarter of you. I would say if you're ever involved in setting up work zones, um, try to get a chance to actually flag a little bit, even if you have to work with a contractor or something like that to do that. You certainly should be trained. You'll have some basic training here. It's useful to understand what's involved with flagging, which tends to either be really boring or really terror, one of the two. Okay, and then let's see where you're from. Is it mostly a rural crowd today? We got a lot of urban folks. Let's just get a sense where you're from. And click on the map. Ooh, we have somebody from Ontario. And yes, this stuff will still be useful. Flagging hasn't changed just because you crossed the border. Okay, we have somebody who put in the Q&A from Fishkill, so that's useful. Okay, okay. Could blend all over the state. I like to see it. Now, one of the things I promised I would do over the summer, and I realized I forgot to do it in my last webinar because it was a quick ad. I jumped in to do it to help out. I was trying to do a fun question each time. And I just, as I said, I was out of town for a couple of weeks at a conference in Louisville. And then while I was there, I went to Mammoth Cave National Park. And then I took a couple of more days off, saw my brother. So what I'd like you to do is, if you've been to a national park, put in your favorite national park, but do it as one word. And to illustrate, I put in, um, you know, I have could put in mine, but put it in one word. So if you do Mammoth Cave, which is where I went, put one word, Mammoth Cave. Okay. And if you want, you can put in the Q&A. And we'll see Yellowstone has come up in the Q&A, and Yellowstone is taking the lead here. My favorite national park is on the list. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. Okay. I've been to all but one of those. I haven't been to Olympic National Park. And the Adirondacks is a state park, which is one of those things. Acadia, yeah, that's a nice one. Okay. So, yeah, New York State is interesting. We have no national parks in New York State. We have a couple of historic parks and things like that, but no full national parks. We are actually one of the few states in the country that has none. There's a corridor in the Midwest that doesn't have many, but we have some of the best state parks. And yes, Fire Island is a national seashore that does exist here in New York State. Okay. So it's sort of fun to think about those things. My favorite, by the way, is Arches. Went there on my honeymoon. But I did go to Mammoth Cave last week. If you haven't been, that's the longest cave system in the world. So again, have a little bit of fun. Think about where you might go in your next vacation. Okay, if you got 5 days. Now, we're going to be going and using that handout that I showed you, and we're also going to be talking about the Flagger Pocket Guide. And again, if you don't have these, uh, we can get them to you. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of them. And we're hoping to get a grant to get even more. So we'll have thousands and thousands of them. The most current version has a yellow vest on the flagger. I left my yellow vest on in honor. I wear one walking in so the cars don't hit me, though that doesn't always work. If you have an older one of the flagger guides that's got the orange vest, it's still the same. There's very little changes there. The work zone pocket guide, which is also linked in the handout, that has changed quite a bit with the new National MUTCD and some changes New York State DOT made. So make sure you get the current one. Both have the yellow vest on. But the flagger guide hasn't changed much. And we're going to be focusing on the flagger today. And why do we focus on the flagger? Well, it comes back to staying safe. Now, we'll see if the video plays. I don't know if the sound will play. Can you hear the sound, Amanda and Jody? Up. How would you like it if somebody drove to your workplace at 65? This was a PSA down out of North Carolina, and the guy's announcing about what, people in their work environments and being safe. I don't think I have to wear the vest, for instance, in my office, and but the idea is to try to be safe, and we want to help people get safely through the work zone and protect the workers. And flaggers are a major component to do this. Now, when we look at the statistics, that's, things we don't like to think about. But in 2022, these are data from the Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse. Um, and you can see there were 136 pedestrian fatalities. There were 280 commercial vehicle crashes, 891 total work zone fatalities, um, 37,000 estimated work zone injuries, and almost 100,000 crashes. Okay? So work zones are actually statistically a pretty high places. And New York State averages about 7 fatalities in work zones in a year, and half of those workers are pedestrians who are struck by a vehicle, which in a lot of cases means the flagger, okay? Because they're the first person that people see. Now, what regulations do we follow? Well, obviously, regulations are important, and we need to follow them. There's the National MUTCD, and of course, New York State has a supplement. They do have, if you're interested, a new draft. So today, right now, we have the 11th edition of the MUTCD put out in December of 2023 and the New York State Supplement, but there's a new one out there. The draft is out, the comments have been received and should be published. I hope later this year, but certainly should be published pretty soon. The good news is, even with those changes, New York State's already implemented most of the changes in their own work zone traffic control uh, information or spec sheets, and that's linked. You can go to it and download their information. For flagging, again, not much has changed. There's some good information there if you're setting up work zones that you may want to look at. Okay. Now, this is true whether we're talking about work zones or we're talking about flagging. There are 5 parts in a work zone. There's the advanced warning area. This is where we put up our advanced signage to help people get in the mode to be ready to enter the work zone. There's a transition area that moves vehicles out of the lane. And I'm talking mostly today about situations where you need a flagger. So usually you have a closed lane. There's some exceptions, but usually there's a transition area. There needs to be a buffer space. We'll talk a lot about buffer space and a work area. Some of the guides actually list the work and buffer space together as a single component. I actually like to keep them separate because the buffer, I think, is very important. We don't really think about it as much as we should. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then, of course, the termination area, the end of the work zone, which may or may not have cones depending on the operation, but something about that. So let me ask you, these are 5 parts of a standard, typical work zone. Where should the flagger stand in that case? Okay, so where should the flagger stand? I'm going to go back and look at the work zone to show it to you. I'll go back to the answers in a second. And again, if you can't get to the poll, you can put it in the Q&A. Where should the flagger be standing? Okay, and you can make an assumption if it's 1 flagger or 2. I don't care. Let's just see what your answers are. Okay, let's go back and look here. Transition, buffer space, buffer area, closed lane. Okay, buffer. Okay, in the case of a 2 flagger operation, and we're going to see if the pen is deciding to be nice here, and it's got me yellow. The flagger should actually be standing. 1 flagger, if you're doing a 2 flagger operation, is standing at the end of the advanced warning area, at the beginning of the transition, and the other one is standing at the end of what would be the termination area. Okay. Out of the way of traffic to stop vehicles before they enter any portion of the work zone that is not the 2 open lanes. Okay. And we'll talk about why as we go through the foundational webinar. That's where they should be standing. If they're in the buffer, they're already too far. And here's a good example of where you see people standing. Yeah, start of the transition. Very good. They're standing in the buffer, and they're actually standing in a really bad spot. They're in the lane, so that if somebody came along, they could get hit. They really should be at the beginning of that area, and they should be having a place where they can get out of the way if they have to. If somebody were to go into this work zone at high speed, where would they go? They've actually blocked themselves off with the crash vehicle, the attenuator. So they can't really just go straight off the road. They certainly won't go across the roadway. You need to think about having an escape route. Okay, so you really want the beginning of the transition area. And that transition area moves traffic out of the way. And then we have a buffer area. Here's an example of a way too short buffer area and not enough cones. And again, we're not going to get into a lot of those details in our 1 hour today, but we really want to have good buffer areas. New York State DOT is trying to implement, especially for fixed work zones, attenuator vehicles in every single one of them. But whether you have an attenuator vehicle or you don't, you've got to have a buffer. And that's not a parking space for the supervisor. And if you're flagging traffic, and especially if you're on the open end or the closed end like this, don't let people park in that space. That buffer area is important. If you haven't seen this video before, this is actually a pretty important one. So watch carefully. Watch the attenuator vehicles, the camera on the back of it, okay, a crash cushion on an interstate in Virginia. And just watch. Here we go. Okay. Now realize that vehicle, that's the attenuator vehicle, does not have its brakes on. Okay? Now if it's in a hill situation, it may have to hold them lightly, but it does not have its brakes on. It's actually better for the driver in that particular case. And there's different levels of crash attenuators, but see how far it moved? You really want to have that space for that vehicle to move if you've got it, and if you don't, you want the space so that a vehicle can stop when they run over the cones before they enter the work zone. Those cones, initial cones, are pretty important. We have the work area itself. Okay. Now the work area itself needs to be delineated well, and the flagger should actually be standing on the opposite side, not blended in with everything else. So you want to be standing in a place where you can see them. And of course, in this particular case, if they got pushed back into the work zone, it could make things really bad. So the work area is a place where the flagger does not want to be. They want to be away from that. They really want to be at the beginning of the advanced warning area. Okay, and you can see in this situation they're working at night. They've got lights to light it up. Okay. Uh, Person says here, better for which driver, the errant vehicle or the attenuator truck? With the attenuator, it's actually better for both. Because what happens is it changes the acceleration. If you've got your brakes on, it's a much quicker deceleration for the driver, and their airbag may help them, may not. But for the driver of the attenuator, it actually puts more force on their back. So it actually is better for the attenuator driver as well. And there's standards for how that's done. Okay. Now, in terms of a typical work zone, this is from the Pocket Guide. There's a much more detailed list of different possible work zones in the work zone Pocket Guide. But in the Flagger Guide, we put in this basic one that just sort of talks about the basic setup of a good work zone and where the flaggers should be standing. And as a reminder, those three advanced signs serve a simple purpose. Get people used to the fact that there is work ahead, which is when we typically start with road work ahead. Tell them, hey, there's a change in the geometry. Usually a one-lane road ahead sign, for instance, is the most common. Okay, and then what do they need to do? In this case, a flagger symbol, which means they may need to stop if the flagger is holding the paddle, okay, up so that they actually need to stop versus just slowing down. Now, there are devices out there that automate this, automated flagging assistance devices, or AFADs. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever worked with or used an AFAD. What happens is the arm comes up, okay? Got a few folks who've done that, okay? You'll actually see, if you look carefully at this particular one, it has a red flag on it, okay, as opposed to a stop. I've seen ones with stops as well. I actually like the stop ones, but again, there's different setups. It's a really matter of what the public gets used to. The biggest concern I've got here is even if you're using an AFAD and a crash vehicle, you need that buffer space, and really isn't enough of a buffer space between the end of the transition and the beginning of the work. That first truck that you see there really is the beginning of the work. Anything that's not attenuator should not be in the buffer area. Okay. Now again, we're going to be talking mostly about flaggers today. And really the main thing is everybody that does flagging needs to be trained. That's actually in the MUTCD. It's a requirement on federal jobs that you certify flagging, even on state jobs. We don't use a certification system here in New York State, but we do ask that everybody be flagged and I mean everybody be trained. So everybody needs some training before they flag. And we'll talk about a couple of ways you can do that that actually are pretty cool. Okay? But before we go into anything with flagger training, let me ask you, what does a flagger protect? So let's see what answers you give me to that. What does a flagger protect? Let's see what the answers are. And again, if you can't access the polls, you can go ahead and put it into the Q&A. The work area, they protect other workers. That's good. They protect the work zone. Yep. Somebody put highway workers in the Q&A. Okay. Workers. Their co-workers. I'm looking for two more. There, I'll count this one. Workers and motorists, the public, the people who are going through, yeah, drivers, the people going through the work zone. Okay? I'm missing one more. The single most important person. In fact, the first person the flagger should be protecting. No, don't see it yet. There it is in the Q&A. Thank you. You're the flagger. You need to protect yourself. If you aren't protecting yourself, how can you do the job of protecting others? The first person you have to protect is yourself. If you've ever been on an airplane, they talk about when the mask comes down, you put the mask on yourself first. The flagger has to protect themselves first, which is one of the most important reasons we want the flagger not standing in the lane. They got to protect themselves first. Okay? So that's the really important thing. You're protecting yourself, then the crew, because they're typically not inside a metal box. Okay? The public, to the best of your ability, you don't want crashes. And of course, lastly, the job site itself, the physical components. We'll trade some job site damage for keeping everybody walking away and being safe. Okay? And of course, it gets more complicated when there's pedestrians and bicycles and other things, but again, you have to be first in the list. And of course, a lot of it has to come back to communication. Good communication makes a huge difference. Give people information that tells them what they're going to expect and what they're supposed to do. So here, this is Austin, Texas. They show up in a lot of my pictures that people send me. Somebody got hold of the electronic sign. They didn't lock it, and they changed it. So it said the end is near, caution, zombies ahead. Now, if there's zombies ahead, great, good message, but it's actually incomplete. Remember, there's three parts. The end is near, that's your first. Oh, great. Zombies ahead, okay. But what am I supposed to do? Do I keep going? Do I turn right? Do I turn around? So you really need a third message in this case that tells me what to do if the zombies are ahead. Okay, let me give you a more real world example. Okay, so in the Q&A, you're coming up, you're at the one lane road, you've been diverted by a flagger into the one lane going up the hill. So you're now going in the downhill lane normally, but you're going up it, you're driving, and you come to a light, okay? Tell me what you think you're supposed to do, and I'll give you a hint. That sign, if you can't read it, that's up there in the middle of the lane up there, says road closed. So in the Q&A, tell me, what am I supposed to do? I'm at a three-way intersection, and I see that sign in front of me. What do you think I'm supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? Turn left. Yeah, a lot of people, I watch this. People, you can't really turn around. So a lot of people turned left. What they wanted people to do is they wanted people to go up here and go where this car is right there. Okay? But if we send them the message that the road is closed, we're going to confuse people. We want to give clear, simple messages. And the flagger is the single most important part of that chain. Good, clear messaging. And no, we shouldn't be doing things like this. Okay, no, it's probably not good. By the way, that one's fake. That one's fake. I don't know if AI can do it better, but that one's fake. So one of the things to think about though is who's using the work zone? Who is entering our work zones? Okay, So give me some examples of who do we have to think about getting through or being in the work zone. Okay? So who has to be in the work zone? And again, as a flagger, these are all the people you're protecting in addition to yourself. The workers, the public, bicycles, contractors, yep. Okay. Might be pedestrians in some cases, might be a delivery vehicle, might be emergency vehicles, yeah, who have to get through. Might be people who are elderly, yeah, I like that. Okay, you got the crew, you got the crew leader, you got supervisors. Okay, you probably got that engineer who typically wants to park in the buffer space. Don't let him. Uh, wears a white hat, thinks he can park there. No, you got lots of different people. Yeah, everyone. Okay. Now you're part of the work zone as well as a flagger, but think about all the users. And so when you're setting things up as a flagger, you're trying to communicate with different people. So I'm going to bundle them into 4 different main groups. We're going to talk about the traveling public, the equipment operators, the supervisors, and the traffic control personnel. And we do this in our work zone sessions, but in this case, let's think about it from the standpoint of the flagger. And we'll come back to the flagger, the traffic control personnel, at the end of this list. So in terms of the traveling public, they want to get through the work zone quickly and safely. Okay? And I hate to say it, their definition of safely is themselves. They really get through quickly. They're not thinking necessarily about the workers. So you, as the flagger, don't put yourself in a risky situation. And you need to communicate to them when you can what's going on to let them know the details. It can make a big difference. So think about the traveling public. And of course, you've already mentioned cars, buses, bicycles. There's lots of different types of vehicles that you're dealing with. Okay? Now, the equipment operators, the crew, they want to keep working. They don't want to slow down. And they actually sometimes will see the flagger as, they're slowing us down. We can't get in and out of the site as quickly as we'd like to. And so what they wind up doing is pulling the flaggers in. No, the flagger needs to be doing traffic control. And don't let them suck you into a place where you're not doing your job protecting them and the public and yourself because they want to keep working. Okay? These sometimes might have to stop. Now, of course, the crew leaders, the supervisors, they want the job done as fast and as cheaply as possible. And yes, this is Austin, Texas again. They're filling potholes. KFC sponsored filling of potholes. Um, I don't think the colonel's vest quite meets the standard. He needs to zip that front up there. Okay. Um, but they want this done as fast and cheaply as possible. And they go, well, quick work, that's going to make it cheaper. But if it's not safe, one crash can make a huge difference. Okay. You all know that. And then finally, you as the flagger, and again, we call them traffic control personnel, you want a smoothly operating work zone that's easy to manage. Maybe not this easy. This might not be the best situation. In fact, this might be a situation, if you've got so low traffic, you can get away with sitting in a chair and having well, I hope that's just a soda or water. Maybe we need to think about setting up our work zone slightly differently. Okay. The number one rule, frankly, I hate to say it, is no one wants to be inconvenienced or placed in harm's way. Okay? And people don't know how to go different ways. They really don't. It's amazing. People will get lost on a simple detour. But there's a utility company near my house. It put up a piece of yellow tape across the road. Yeah, they didn't need a flagger, but it really wasn't doing the job it needed to do. Okay? So let's talk about the basic functions of a flagger. So I'll let you put in a few, and then we'll come back to this answer. So just put a few in, and then we'll talk about the basic functions. And again, if you could download the Pocket Guide, you can look through it. Yeah, you're managing traffic, you're communicating, okay? You're trying to improve safety, okay? To the best of your ability, okay? You're trying to give good directions. You want eye contact. I like that. Okay, these are all good things. Very good. So the basic functions, and again, this comes right from the handbook. Your primary function in a lot of ways is to help guide people. You're guiding them through the work zone in a safe way, or as safe as you can, which means you need to be protecting yourself, the rest of the crew, the public, the property site. And if you do that well, you actually do the third function, which is to avoid delay. You want to hold people up, but no more than you need to. Okay? Holding someone for 10 or 15 minutes creates other issues. You really don't want to be doing that. So if you could be moving people, that's good. And if you're going to have long delays, maybe you need to think about something else and work with the supervisors to do that. Where you can answer questions. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that where you can answer questions. You can't always do that. Okay? Now, to do that, you've got equipment. Okay? Let's see what kind of equipment you guys have. What kind of equipment should we have? We have a paddle. Okay? I'm going to step away from my microphone just so I can grab something while you fill this out. Okay. So you've got map, you've got, excuse me, hats, you've got a vest, you've got your personal protective equipment, you've got your radio maybe if you have one, an AFAD if you can. That's nice. I like those if you can get them. Hard hats. Okay. So there's some basic equipment you want to have. Okay. And a communication device if possible. Not always possible. Okay. So one of the things I would say to anyone who's using radios or any kind of communication device to talk back and forth, make sure you know what you do if that equipment fails. Okay? What do you do? What's the happens in that particular scenario? And again, you can use a horn or a whistle to alert people. Okay, so let's go through what's listed in the book, on the hand guide, and think about it. First one's the paddle. Okay? Now, paddle is the primary device. Okay, so here's my little mini paddle. Okay? Look how small this is. Okay, and I'll move it to the background where you can actually see it. Actually, I got to turn off the background. Hang on. Give me just a second. Boo-doo-doo. Video effects, backgrounds, none. There we go. Here's my office. Okay. There's the sign. Okay, I'm going to move it away so it's a little bit. There we go. Okay, it's really small. That little picture you see of me, that's when you see the stop sign. That's what you first see. Okay, and I'll bring it closer, and eventually you can read that it says stop. Okay. The reason we use a paddle as the primary device, people recognize that stop sign long before they can read the word stop. They see that octagon, okay? And if it's orange, you can even tell at a distance it's orange, okay? The flag, the red flag, it's a square. We don't really know what that square means. It's really tiny, okay? But the paddle is the primary device, okay? You want to have the right clothing. Now, when I say clothing, I'm not talking just about what you've got in terms of personal protective equipment. I'm talking about clothing for the day. You know, you're going to be out in the sun all day long. Maybe you want long sleeves actually to protect yourself. Okay. Long pants, boots, comfortable shoes. You're going to be standing all day. Okay. So make sure you've got good, comfortable stuff. And of course, a vest. A vest is not only required, but it's good for safety too. And a good vest, I like the ones with the pockets. I can put things in it. Okay. A hat is required for a variety of reasons. We use it as a communication device. It can be a hard hat. Raise your hand if you have a hard hat policy. Raise your hand if you have a hard hat policy. I can see how many of you do. Okay. Quite a few of you do. And again, that's fine. Is a hard hat required by the MUTCD? No. Is it a good idea if people are hauling, especially aggregates and stones? Yes. Okay. So again, you need to decide what's your policy and then try to stick with it. But the hat is a communication device, okay? And again, suitable attire, maybe some water. Uh, Clothing is pretty important. You need a whistle or a horn to alert people. We actually like whistles because they don't have the air horn breakdown, and also people don't tend to just burp them all the time. Um, and then, of course, signs. Now, all the signs in a work zone is everybody, but the flagger ahead sign, try to make that flagger. If you're flagging or you're having someone flag for you, put the flagger ahead sign under their control. They turn it to traffic when it's being used. They turn it away from traffic when it's not being used. That's part of the overall equipment. Okay? And remember, complex backgrounds create confusion. Okay? Now this is from our work zone set, but in the Q&A, how many workers did you see? See if anybody can guess how many workers they saw. 4. We got a 4. We got a 5. We got a 4. The answer, by the way, if you're wondering, is actually 5. Okay, there are actually 5 workers there, 3 from the DOT, 2 from the troopers doing an accident investigation. The point is we want to make sure as a flagger, we're standing where we can be seen. Work zones are complicated. It's hard to see. I'll show you a couple of other pictures. Stand in a place where you can be seen, maybe even wear different colors than the rest of the crew. If the crew's wearing orange, you wear lime green. If your crew's wearing lime green, maybe you wear orange. Create a situation where you can be seen, and of course, everybody in the right-of-way does have to wear a vest. That's required, okay? A class 2 vest like this, you can have a higher level vest with a little bit of a sleeve on it if you want, okay? If you have to work at night, you'll need class 3. A vest by itself doesn't do that. You definitely need the arms or legs or hands even to get up to be able to tell it's a human, okay? But retroreflective clothing makes a difference. And look at the picture of the 3 guys, or 7 people on the right. Is it 7 or 6? 6 people on the right. You can see that one wearing the lime green stands out. So again, we like to think about maybe having the flagger wear a slightly different color. You can also, by the way, tell who the supervisor is because he hasn't put his vest on yet. Okay. Now, there are lots of do's and don'ts for good flaggers. Okay. Let's just go through a few of them and think about this if you're flagging traffic. You do want to stay alert. And that's what makes the job of flagging both very critical, but also at the time can be very difficult because there's not a lot of traffic. You can go long periods of time, there's nothing. And you're like, not paying attention. You ever watch these sporting events with the security people watching the crowd? They're not watching the game. If it gets a dull event, they got to watch the crowd. That can be pretty hard. You got to stay alert. Be ready for vehicles. You need to get good, clear signals, and I'll go through a few of those here in just a sec. Um, and of course, you want to stand. You want to stand on the side of the road facing traffic, away from the work zone. I'll talk about what a single flagger does as well in our short time together. But make sure you're standing where if somebody didn't see you, you would be okay. And plan where you go if they get into where you need to be. Okay. Um, you should know what work's being done. Maybe not a super level of detail, but enough to answer questions. You know, we're patching potholes. We're replacing a culvert. We got half the road closed. We're putting up uh, a new light pole. Whatever you're doing, enough to be able to tell the people who are driving, if you can talk to them, hey, it's going to be a couple of minutes. We may have to close both lanes because there's a crane picking things up, things like that. So they have a good sense of what's going on. You need to be courteous to people, okay? Don't tell them they're number one. And of course, have the proper equipment. If you're not sure, that little handbook's there specifically to help people out. Maybe just as important is what you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be standing in the road. It drives me nuts because I know that flaggers get killed standing in the road. I said earlier, 7 is the average number of people killed in work zones in New York State. One year we had 4 flaggers killed. 3 of the 4 were standing in the lane. Okay. The 4th one was hit, by the way, because they didn't have an escape route. So don't stand in the road, please. Don't leave the thing unattended. So, you know, I know you gotta go, but don't leave it unattended. So as a supervisor, don't leave people out there forever. Give them some breaks. Try not to get distracted. That can be difficult, I know. It's tended to want to watch the work, but you should be watching the traffic, okay? Now, there's a lot more do's and don'ts available in the handbook, but in an hour, we can't cover everything. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the critical components of flagging. We'll start with the signs in the station. And that, when I mean station, I mean where the flagger is standing. You can actually do a station, okay? As opposed to this, okay? You know, a good vest, a good hard hat, or just even a plain ball cap that's white colored, um, shows respect. And by the way, a cone right beside where you're going to be standing actually helps people realize, that's where the flagger is going to be. Even a couple of cones if it's going to be a long-term situation. Okay? So the appearance makes a big difference. People see and communicate first with the flagger. And if the flagger doesn't get respect, neither will the rest of the work zone site. In terms of where the flaggers should be standing, there are two possibilities. Single flagger, double flagger. If you've got a lot of traffic, the double flaggers are where I talked about earlier, at the begin and ending of anything that's related to the work. So the beginning of the transition area and the beginning end of the termination zone. If it's a single flagger, they should be standing across the road from the work, and they shouldn't be standing still. They don't just stand in one spot. They have to move back and forth to stop the traffic in the two different directions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We won't have a lot of time because it's only a foundational webinar. But just think about it. If you're doing single flagging, can you walk in back and forth in the work zone safely to take care of the traffic? If there's too much traffic where you can't do that, probably shouldn't be doing that. And usually you're going to have three signs, unless you got a very low speed situation or you're doing certain kinds of work where people can almost self-regulate. Okay. Now, in terms of all work zone warning signs, they are black on orange, 36 inch in size, and at least a foot above the ground. Okay. They're going to be retroreflective, and that your advanced warning signs, and they should be removed when not needed. And again, as a flagger, the flagger ahead sign is your responsibility. Turn it when it's not needed. That still removes it from the use of the drivers. Please don't do this. Okay. We can do better than that. Now, in terms of how far the signs are spaced apart, 100 to 350 for urban, depending on the speed limit, 500 feet for rural. Again, we say urban versus rural, really look at the speed people are traveling. If they're going the 50, 55 miles an hour, 500 feet. If they're going 30 or 25 miles an hour, get down to 100 feet. Okay? What you really want is enough time for people to read the sign, figure out what they're going to do, and react and be ready for the next sign. Okay, so that's where the spacing comes from. Now, you're the flagger, but everybody needs to know this. I want you to rank, you get to rank these. There are actually, as you can see, 4 items in the list: cones, working equipment and crew, advanced signs, and the flagger. You can actually drag these around, okay, and put them in the right order. Which one goes in the work zone first? Put that at the top, then second, then third, then fourth. Let's see what y'all come up with. Okay, and just based on time, I go ahead and click. And somebody put in the Q&A, they put cones, advanced signs, flagger, and crew. Okay, y'all put advanced signs, cones, then flagger. And then down at the bottom, if we drag down, obviously the last thing is the working equipment and the crew. Okay. I would do it slightly differently. Okay. Slightly differently. Okay. So I'm going to show you my order. We'll talk about why. We can debate these things. And there will be work zones where things are slightly different. Okay. But normally you would put up the advanced sign. So the road work ahead sign gets up, then the flagger ahead, the 1-lane road, then the flagger ahead sign. I actually then put my flagger out there. I get the flagger out there ready to stop traffic so the rest of the crew can put up the cones. Okay? So the flagger could go ahead and stop traffic at that point. If you've got 2 flaggers, you've already got the other flagger in situation. So the cones actually go before the equipment. Okay? So that's the order I have. And my reason I do that is anytime somebody goes into the lane, I want to have a flagger ready if I'm going to be using flaggers. Now, are there exceptions? Yeah, on some roadways, I actually want that flagger out there watching even as we're putting up the signs. They may not stop traffic, but they're watching to make sure that they see the traffic. Because putting them up and taking them down is one of the most dangerous parts. And to remove it, you do the exact opposite. You remove everybody out of the work zone area, you take all the cones down, you then take the flagger out of the site, and then take all the signs away. Okay? We can argue about nuances, but just think about what the public is going to see, and that can make a difference. And remember, hide, turn, or cover the signs when they're not needed. So if you're working and you go over lunch, you're going to reopen both lanes, take all the cones away, then turn those signs and get rid of them. If, on the other hand, they're staying up, you got to keep a flagger out there. Okay? So when they're not needed, definitely want to turn them down. Okay? Now, in terms of flagger stations, The main thing I don't want you doing is standing where the vehicles are going to go because, like it or not, vehicles will not stop sometimes, and they'll go through the cones. And hopefully, if you've got good cones, they hit the cones and stop before they enter the work zone. Okay? As opposed to this gentleman who was standing and not even looking at me. And I could have easily hit him at 45 miles an hour. If I do that, his chances of walking away are pretty small. His chances of being killed are 50-50. Okay? So try not to stand in the roadway and stand where the public can see you. You know, if you've got hills and curves, you want to be able to see the vehicles coming up to you. If you think about it, if you're standing on the roadway, you'd really want to see about, if you can, about 14 or 15 seconds from when you first see a vehicle until they get to you. If you can't get that, try to get at least 7 as a minimum. That's the minimum you'll need for sight distance. If you've got good advanced signage, it will help, but it's not going to be perfect. And if you get problems, you can always extend where the work zone starts and stops. Okay? And if you've got a horizontal curve, which is the one on the lower right, make sure you think about the fact that drivers are looking at the roadway. They're not looking around the corner. So don't stand at the the outside end of a sharp corner or the inside end. Try to stand at the straightaway, even if you have to extend the work zone slightly. Okay. Now, in terms of the signals and operations, again, we use a paddle for this. Okay. To stop traffic, you're going to hold your hand out. You're going to have your paddle. Okay. And that's pretty easy. To release the traffic, you're going to turn to the slow on your little paddle, okay? And you're going to wave with your hand. If it's the closed lane, you're the initial flagger, put your hand so that it's all the way across to get them into the other lane. If it's the open lane, try to keep your hands close. You'd be amazed. The public actually does respond to that, okay? Now, in terms of slowing traffic, you can wag the paddle back and forth, but as you can see, I don't know why my thing went to, there we go. You can see it's hard to see unless they're close. So if they're really coming up quick, um, sometimes might put it back to stop for a second, try to get them to stop before they go in so fast, even if they've got the open lane, because of just safety issues, okay? So be thinking about that, respect the public, and you'll be in pretty good shape, okay? Now, if everything is clear, there's no traffic in either direction, you can give an all clear signal. Now, if you got a radio, you can do that, but you can also do it with your hat and make sure you and your other flagger knows this. Hey, if I raise my hat, that means it's clear. I don't have any traffic. If I see traffic coming, maybe my thing is to wag back and forth. That's the most common that I've seen. Okay. And then I've got the stop paddle up. And the cool thing, if I've got the stop paddle up, my co-flagger sees slow. Okay. And again, if you got radios, that's obviously optimum. Now, in terms of walking in the road, we always tell people wait till there's at least 2 and then you can go to the first vehicle. But again, look at sight distance. And hey, today, like it or not, most vehicles have electric windows. Ask them to roll the window down. Turning the hand still works. Have them lower their window and you can talk to them across. Then you're never in the lane. Okay. And then try to let them know what's going on to answer simple questions. Now, in terms of operations, with 2 flagger operations, obviously you're going to be in constant contact with each other. You want to be able to see if you can. You want to have radios if you have to, and there's other techniques for longer work zones. And again, for single flagger operations, the flagger really should be standing across the road, and it should only be used really for low volume, short work zones with good sight distance. And a good rule of thumb is I can walk back and forth. My flagger station in this case is not that one spot. My flagger station actually, I gotta pick a color you guys can see. I'll do purple today. The flagger station actually is all the way here. I'm gonna be able to walk back and forth to be able to talk to the traffic. And if I can't, that's enough traffic where I can do that low enough, great. But if there's a lot of traffic, like thousands of cars a day, probably not gonna work. So in this case, if you look at this particular site from above, there's the catch basin they were working on. You'd have to think about a work zone setup that goes from here past the work, and you're going to be as a flagger walking. Whoop, I love it when it does that. Walking from here all the way to here, back and forth. And if you can't do that as a flagger, you probably shouldn't be doing a single flagger operation. Okay? Now, if you're flying in an intersection, it can get very complicated very, very quickly. Again, you got to stand where people can see you. If you can get hold of a controller, if it's a light, signal light, you can actually use that to help you, or you purposely turn it off to an all blink situation. You're probably going to need multiple people. And I know a lot of agencies have very few workers. You may have to work with another agency. This may be a great case where you have to share. And maybe the one crew does the flagging and the other crew does the work kind of thing. Now, again, we only have an hour, so we can't get into some of the details, but just as a reminder, there's lots of other techniques people have used. There's pilot cars, there's nighttime flagging that's supposed to be lit up. But the reality is we all do a little work in the beginning and in the day in the winter, and that's really close to nighttime flagging. So think about that. When is it safe? And you may even just have a single flagger to stop vehicles because you're bringing trucks in and out of a roadway. So again, there's lots of different operations. There's mobile work. There's all kinds of times when flaggers are available, but the number one rule is to protect yourself. Okay. Now, in terms of emergency use, you should have a red flag. You can use that. The signals are there. They're the old standard signals. But again, it's a tiny little thing. It's hard to see. So you really want to think about having a paddle available. And if worse comes to worse, you can use that emergency flag, but get a paddle in place, preferably two paddles if it's a crash situation to help keep vehicles safe getting around the site. Okay? So keep these things in mind. Flagging is one of those things, as I say, it can be lots of fun. Actually, it's been enjoyable. Flaggers I learned from had been doing it for years, and they did a great job. Now, let's do a quick summary, okay? And then we'll get you out of here right on time, okay? So what are the qualifications for a good flagger? What are the qualifications for a good flagger? Yep, gotta be patient. You want to make sure they're trained, okay? Attentive, alert, have good awareness. Yep, they're competent. You trust them to protect you. And so we go put the youngest person who we don't really know and throw them out there to do flagging. Think about that for a second. You really want the flagger to be somebody you trust and that meets all of the things you just put down. That's a good flagger. Level-headed, somebody who doesn't panic or doesn't tell the public what they probably need to hear, or at least does it in a courteous way, as someone put, okay? Because a flagger must be alert at all times. They have to be visible, and you really want somebody who's a bit motivated, okay? I think everybody should flag now and then just to get an idea of what it's like. It really helps them understand what the flagger's role is. But of course, they need to be trained before they do that. And that means they need to learn that they have to stand alone, which can be hard. They have to face traffic. That can be hard. And again, please don't let them stand in the travel lane. That's just something I don't want to see. Okay? Now, we already talked about the flagger's equipment. If you're not sure about flagger's equipment, remind yourself again, is the paddle is the first and primary device. The red flag is only an emergency device or in odd situations like an intersection. Okay. You got to have a vest. Vest will last for, 30, 40 washings. If you're not sure if they're bright enough at night, check. Go out there at night, hit it with a flashlight and see. Again, hard hat or at least a hat. Okay. And then suitable attire. Somebody, by the way, over in the Q&A has put patience down as a requirement. Knew a flagger used the wooden handle of the flag to knock off the side mirror of a car speeding through the work zones. He had mini speeders and he finally had enough. Yeah, and that's true. I've dropped a flag on cars, especially with the old flag that the state used to allow um, to try to get their attention. But yeah, it's tough. You may have to get law enforcement involved in some cases. We recommend a whistle, but a horn can be useful. And remember, the flagger ahead sign, we recommend that that's the job of the flagger to turn it when it's not being needed. Okay. Now, last couple of things to get our PDH questions and also get you out of here. What are the 5 parts of a work zone? We'll see if you get the 5 parts. The buffer, got one. There's 5 parts. Remember, some things put work and buffer together, but we actually purposely keep them separate. The transition area, that's good. Advanced warning, the work area, and the termination. Very good. Nice job. Okay. I like the fact that transition and buffer are at the top. That's good. Um, why are work zones important? During the Q&A, give me a reason why work zones are important. Protects the public. It gives an identification of area. We try to make things as safe for all. Yeah. By giving a good quality work zone, everybody can be safe. I love that one. Everybody wants to go home. Whenever I'm thinking about choice A versus choice B, I go back to a picture I found in my mom's old picture box and scanned them, luckily, before she passed away. And that's my grandmother, my mother, and a model airplane that my grandpapa built. And so it reminds us we want to stay safe. We want everybody to go home every single day. So where should the flagger be standing? Where should this flagger be standing? You can click on this picture, by the way. The flagger should probably be standing down there at the beginning of this, okay? A little particular spot. If you look carefully, you can actually see the flagger where somebody has put one of the dots over the car in the lane. And the reason for that has to do with the fact that they were having problems with vehicles coming off the freeway section. And the flagger standing where you put your marks, which is correct, led to problems. You may have to actually have a second flagger in this situation with an actual flag because of the challenge of how stop slow paddles work. Um, Again, we're not going to get into work zones too much, but it can be a challenge. But please don't stand in the lane. And you can see, by the way, here's the picture of that site. You can actually see where they wind up having the flagger standing. And again, if they have to have the flagger there because of the intersection, I'd really like to have them at the beginning of where that rail section sits, where the cones are. So if they had to, they could get out of the way. Okay. And this is a tough site. I'm not saying it isn't. What's the proper color for work zone signs? Again, you can throw that in the Q&A real quick. Orange and black. Very good. Yeah, there's a couple of weird exceptions that exist, but again, orange and black. Yeah. And by the way, if you want to do training with your folks, it's a great winter activity or a rainy day activity. Set up a work zone in the shop bay and proportional spacing, but have people walk through it and you can actually practice. And timing and the speeds are actually close enough that they work pretty well. And you can see the walkers, here in this case, are our vehicles. And you can actually practice this. And it's a good way to train new people because the worst case scenario is a little horseplay. Two people bump into each other. You do that with a car, remember, 40 miles an hour, it's a 50-50 shot of walking away. Okay? So if you haven't done training, it's a great way to do it in the winter. It's easy to set up, and you just do proportional spacing. With whatever equipment you've got, try to set up as realistic as possible if you can. Okay? Now, we've got 2 minutes, so perfect on the timing. Just as a reminder, we've got 2 more of our webinars to go after today. We've got ethics next week. We've got snow and ice strategy after that. And then hopefully we'll see you at our fall workshops. We want to make sure we get folks signed up for those. We have 8 of them around the state. Please log in and sign up. We'd love to see you at those. And we're setting up for next year's work, our workshops and everything. If you're interested, please let us know. We may have more details on things over the next couple of weeks and as we go through with our little bumper banter on Mondays. With that, any questions? You can throw a question into the Q&A. Got time for one more question? If anybody has one? If not, I will give you back about 1 minute of your day. That will still give you your PDHs. We'll go with 59 minutes. Okay. Everybody have yourself a great day and stay safe out there, please. Bye-bye.